r/ProRevenge. Posted by user Quixels. You picked on the wrong underdog, guy. Someone just linked me to this sub, and ooh boy, do I have a story for you guys. I'm still proud of this to this day. Obligatory throwaway disclaimer, and all names are changed. A few years ago, I was working in a job I really enjoyed with a team I really gelled well with. There were about 5 of us working on the same portfolio of projects in different roles, and every single team member was just cream of the crop, incredibly good at what they do. I can't overemphasize how satisfying it was to work with such an incredibly competent, likable group of people. In this job, instead of getting the Sunday night blues, I would get excited thinking about the work I would be doing the next day, and planning how we would solve the complex problems together. It was like a series of logic puzzles. Yes, I realize I'm a huge nerd. I promise I also had a life outside of work. The one downside, there's always a downside, to this job was Steve. Steve was not in the supervisory line for me or any of my team members, but he was about 3 levels above us and very senior. He'd been there for years and was tight with senior leadership. Steve was also a mega creep. He said extremely inappropriate things to young women in the office, and he apparently wasn't averse to being handsy, though as far as anyone knew, that was as bad as it had gotten. The women in the office all knew to steer clear of him. My first week on the job, the Whisper Network made sure I knew, never be alone with Steve. Sexual harassment is difficult to document, and no one wanted to risk their career, and put a target on their back going after a big guy like Steve, so he just got away with it for years. So for a couple of years, I followed this advice. There were a few instances of Steve saying incredibly uncomfortable things to me in passing, but for the most part, I managed to avoid him. Then I found out that my teammate Rob had gotten on Steve's radar. For context, Rob is non-neurotypical and has some minor tickish behavior. He's also shy and easily spirals into social anxiety when put in uncomfortable situations. So one evening at our team's informal weekly happy hour after work, Rob lets it slip that Steve's been giving him a hard time. The rest of us are like, whoa, wait, what? Because Steve never interacts with staff at our level, except to creep on women, and we basically make Rob tell us everything. Basically for the last few weeks, Steve has been bullying Rob, making fun of his tics, and mimicking his way of speaking back to him. He's also been asking Rob how he can possibly be competent to do his job and implying he's a pity hire. Once he called him a retard. It's clear Steve is seeking out Rob for this, because, again, there's really no reason for him to interact with our team. Rob has been having horrible anxiety over this situation, and has had bad insomnia and stomach issues since Steve started targeting him. And not that it bears repeating, but just to reiterate, Rob is a fucking beast at his job. And a genuinely good guy. At this point, I'm seeing red. We all were. We tell Rob to go to HR, that his neurological issues put him in a protected class, that he could get Steve in big trouble. Rob panics and says he can't do that, begs us not to tell anyone at work, and says he wishes he hadn't said anything. We assure him we won't say anything if that's what he wants, but we're all very distressed. I leave the bar fuming just thinking, okay, that's it. Fuck you, Steve. You're going down. I can't tell anyone about what's happening to Rob, because I promised him as much, so I start my own paper trail. I start baiting Steve. And I don't mean I behave in any suggestive manner or lead him on, I just stop avoiding him, and I even initiate contact myself. I instant message him through the company's instant message system very professionally / politely asking if a big client will be staying on through the next project cycle, and the floodgates open. He starts sending me outrageously sexual, instant messages. I mostly don't respond, but I occasionally keep him going by sending extremely literal responses to his innuendo-laden questions, or pretending not to understand something suggestive he's saying. Sometimes when he clarifies, I'll outright say, "This isn't appropriate," or "This is making me uncomfortable," or "Please don't say things like that, Steve," but he steamrolls right over me. During this time, I've also been seeing him more in person around the office, and he often says gross stuff to me in person as well, a lot of it not just inappropriate, but bizarre and nonsensical. Is it legal to have an ass like that in that skirt? Lol, what? Every time this happens, I immediately go back to my desk and write down what he said, the date and time, and the names of any witnesses. After about a month and change of this, I compile my creep journal with printouts of the instant message conversations and take them to my HR rep. I ask to file a sexual harassment complaint against Steve. As soon as the words, sexual harassment, leave my mouth, my rep instantly gets the head of HR and 2 other reps, and they go through my evidence with me, and ask me a ton of questions. The head of HR assures me they'll take my complaints very seriously, and asks if I know of any women around the office who have had similar issues with Steve. I'm able to give them several names. They send me on my way, and 2 weeks later, my rep formally reaches out to me and lets me know Steve has been let go. Much jubilation is had around the office. It took a couple of months for me to piece together the whole story, but basically, after my complaint, HR started following up with the names I gave them, both the witnesses to my in-person encounters with Steve, and the other women he'd harassed. They corroborated what I'd told HR, and then through them, word started spreading around the office that HR was conducting a sexual harassment investigation against Steve. This emboldened at least 15 different women, who'd been biting their tongues about Steve for ages, to come forward and tell their own Steve stories. The worst story was from a junior staff member who Steve had been inebriated with at a company party the year prior. During all of this, IT had been asked to go through Steve's emails and IMs, and this had not only been used to validate my printouts as legitimate, but IT had found a ton of additional incriminating stuff in Steve's correspondences. Somewhat frustrating, Steve received an extremely generous severance package as part of his termination. But on the bright side, word got around the industry quickly, and Steve was poison at that point. No company would touch him with a 10-foot pole. The last time I thought to snoop on his public social media pages, he was listing himself as an independent consultant in our industry, which I seriously doubt he's actually doing, and based on his public Facebook page, he's doing a couple of MLMs, so that should kill off whatever savings he has in short order. I don't work with Rob anymore, but I did recently attend his wedding. He's extremely happy with his new wife, who is a sweet and lovely woman, and he's doing really well in his career. TLDR, powerful corporate suit pics on my awesome coworker. I transform into a goddess of fury and end his career by exposing him for what he is. Edit, thanks for the shiny gold, to whoever did the gilding. Posted by, user, LRobRex, dealing with a gas thief. I've shared this story before, and I'll share it again. Several years ago I lived in the northwest coast of Puerto Rico. It's a very relaxed area, with tons of good restaurants and lots of green space. My apartment was on a cliff, not far from the water. The electric infrastructure was a bit old, so when it was rainy season, we'd lose power for a few hours at a time. Not a big deal, I had a gasoline generator. Enter a new neighbor. He lived 2 doors down from me, and drove an amazing custom Chevy van from the 70s. All it needed was an epic airbrushed wizard on the side. Sadly though, that's where anything good about him ended. I caught him taking the gas out of an orange jug I'd leave outside in case the generator ran out. Although I saw him do it, and called him out on it, he denied it and played stupid. So after the second time, I took all of the gas in the jug, filled the generator with it, and put the rest in my car. I then went to the nearest gas station that had diesel, and filled it up with diesel. A few days later, I am woken up by a tow truck backing up to pick up his now disabled van. I looked out the window and you could see the anger on his face. He moved out the next month, and from what I gathered, from talking to people in the community, he was a general piece of shit human and what happened to him was deserved. Posted by user, deleted. Revenge is best served frozen. We don't own a car and live at the end of a cul-de-sac. I have people use my driveway all the time to turn around. It's not a huge deal to me, a little annoying when they compact the snow, and it's harder to shovel, but whatever. One of my neighbors had a ride service come pick up their child every day. The van would park in my spot and begin honking at like 8 a.m. I worked nights at the time. Half the time he'd be half parked on my grass. I told my neighbor that I don't overly mind my spot being used, but not if he's going to honk like that every morning, and especially not if he's going to drive over what little lawn I have every time. She spoke with him, he ignored it. I spoke with him and got, "What's your problem, man? It's not like you're using it." To which I repeated that, I don't mind him using it if he stays off my grass and doesn't honk every morning. Apparently suggesting he wait till the kid notices he's there, or, God forbid, he has to drag his ass out of the car to knock on a door was just ridiculous and inhumane of me. So I left a recycle bin at the foot of my driveway. He just ran over it. I called the dispatch for the ride service and was told they are subcontractors, and technically self-employed, but they will pass along the message. I wake up the next day to pounding on my door. The dude is pissed.
"How dare you call my boss, you stupid piece of shit? What the fuck is wrong with you?"
Well, it's quite simple. You were told not to use my driveway, if you were going to drive on my lawn and wake me up every morning. Now get off my doorstep.
"I'll sue you if I lose my job because of you."
You've been warned. Don't trespass on my driveway or property again. The dude storms off in a huff, spouting obscenities, etc. So this happened on a Thursday. The kids have a PD day the next day, and it's supposed to be one of those delightful Canadian weekends where it drops to like -40°C. For my American friends, -40 is where Celsius and Fahrenheit meet up, so it's freaking cold lol. So that night, I grabbed one of my more beat up plastic garbage bins, made sure to plug all the holes with a generous amount of duct tape, stuck a sign on it that read, "Private property, driveway not for public use," and proceeded to fill it to the brim with water. Now, before anyone thinks I'm a jerk willing to potentially endanger the other kids in the car, I'd like to point out that my neighbor's kid is the first to be picked up, so it's just him in the car. Cue Monday morning. He sees the garbage can, backs up a bit more and defiantly charges the garbage can, as if to teach me a lesson, and proceeds to cause some pretty serious damage to the front end of his car. The dude gets out fuming, calls the cops and comes pounding on my door, screaming about how I'm going to buy him a new car and that I'm about to be arrested. Cop:
"So let me make sure I understand this situation. He asked you not to park here if you couldn't refrain from honking, then warned you not to park here and put up a barrier. Now you expect him to be charged and pay for damages you caused yourself to your vehicle in an attempt to destroy his own personal property?"
I will never forget the look on his face when the officer said,
"Yeah, that's not how this works,"
and turned to me and asking if I wanted to pursue charges for him damaging my personal property. I just gave him the most shit-eating grin I could muster and said, "Nah, I think we're good." I then went back inside to enjoy a morning coffee, while watching him from my kitchen window as he paced back and forth in the cold waiting for a tow truck, and having to call the company he worked for to explain why they needed to send out another driver to complete his route. Edit: thanks for the silver and gold. More edits for closure. No, I never saw him again. As far as the police officer, I wasn't aware that it wasn't up to me, and he didn't say anything about it either. I assume he really didn't want to have to bother with the paperwork, and thought I may have gotten upset if he'd said, "Well, I don't see the need to press charges at this point," so he made it seem like it was my choice. Source: I'm somewhat lazy and would likely do the same. A cul-de-sac can also be used to describe a street with no exit, which is exactly where my home is. It's easier for them to use my driveway than 3-point turn their way out like Austin Powers. I was drinking morning coffee because they were 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. shifts. So nights but not quite overnights, and I usually got up at around 10 a.m. Every time he'd wake me up around 8 or so, I wouldn't be able to get back to sleep. Hence why I needed him to stop. Finally, I really appreciate all the love and comments this post has received. I assumed a few would get a laugh, but holy crap. I wasn't prepared for this kind of reaction. That being said, I find the sheer number of comments I need to reply to quite overwhelming for my somewhat introverted self. So on that note, I'm out, and leave all this accumulated karma to be sacrificed to the Reddit gods. I spend way too much time on here anyway. If you like these stories, hit that like button, and leave a comment below. You can upvote these stories by pressing the links in the description. If you want to hear more stories from me, hit the subscribe button, and press the bell icon to be alerted when a new video is posted.